just so that everybody knows what's going on. We've basically just done it. We're just going to keep ourselves on mute apart from you and I, so that we can hear you sharing your wisdom. If anybody has any questions, pop them in the box. We'll either ask them from there. If you don't want to come on and share your face, then that's absolutely fine. But if you do, then I will ask as we have the questions appear, and you can let us know whether you want to join us. So yeah, just
you can
ask.
also show your face and stay mute.
Yes. Yes. That's very true. Yeah. So thank you, Michael, for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
Just so that you know a little bit about the summit, and for those who are kind of new today joining us, I call it a Self-Rediscovery Summit, and for me it's because that's kind of twofold, and that's been my journey. So I think a lot of people come to that expecting it to be exploring kind of and playing with who we are in human form and who we want to be and the life we want to create, but for me, it's also about seeing more deeper about who we really are. And I'm just going to admit some more people that are waiting. And so, yeah, it's kind of twofold. It's kind of exploring who we are beyond all thought, and then exploring who we are in kind of thought form as well, and playing with that. So we've been hearing from lots of different speakers about loads of different topics, and it's kind of about kind of seeing what speakers have kind of felt they've been suffering with, and then how they've found freedom from that and unraveled a life that they love. So we've explored all sorts of things. We've had Amy on talking about habits. We've talked about intuitive eating, mental health, money, and through to kind of the wisdom in the female cycle and the body, and writing and creativity. So I'm really excited to kind of hear your take on what your subject is, which I guess really is all of that, but yeah, so we're live.
Except my wife would tell you the female psyche, not everything else though. I'm good on everything else.
Well, you know, that's fine. It's still all about wisdom though at the end of the day, isn't it? So yeah, and we're live most Fridays, and if people haven't been able to make it live, then there's a replay in the member area as well, so they can catch up. If anybody's kind of struggling with understanding anything, I'm always there on email or in the member area to answer questions, and I jump on live to make sense of things that people come up with in the Self-Rediscovery Facebook community as well. But just to introduce you a little bit to everyone, yeah, we're in for a treat today. I've been really excited for this. So yeah, Michael Neill, when I first came across the principles that I now share, I listened to Michael Neill's, or your TED talk, Why Aren't We Awesomer? And basically it changed my life. So we are super lucky to have you here today, sharing with us about that. And it's actually the number one resource that I kind of share with my clients, because it's one of those really impactful, for me, one of those really impactful talks. So yeah, but formally, I guess you have your bio. So you describe yourself as an internationally renowned author, speaker, and thought leader, challenging the cultural mythology that stress and struggle are a prerequisite to creativity and success. So we'll talk a little bit about that, because that sounds interesting. You've got best-selling books, podcasts, keynotes, trainings, and retreats, and you've inspired and impacted millions of people on 6 continents around the world. As the founder,
I'm trying to get into Antarctica, but there's just penguins will not hire me.
Well, you never know. It's just one new thought, and they might.
Sure, I know. You're hearing my limitations. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you never know. And you're the founder and CEO of Genius Catalyst Inc. And your mission is to unleash the human potential with intelligence, humor, and heart, which you always do. And your unique brand of loving disruption has made you a beloved catalyst, coach, and creative spark plug to CEOs, leaders, creative artists, and anyone who wants to get more out of themselves and their lives whilst making more of a difference in the world. You're listed as one of the top 30 coaching thought leaders in the world. And you travel the world sharing your message of possibility and hope that miracles happen all the time, and a better life is never more than one thought away, even for penguins. Okay, so when I first came across you, I actually read The Space Within, which I have here. And you were sharing your insights around kind of mental health and how the mind works, or at least that's how it looked to me, because I was kind of looking at it through that lens. And I know these days you share a lot about creativity. So I guess, and what's truly possible. So I guess kind of it'd be nice to touch on a bit of both. And I know people love a bit of a shared story because we like narratives and stories. And I love your journey because it's a great example of what we're really talking about in this summit. So the idea that we can kind of find freedom from our suffering and unravel a life we love through self-rediscovery. So I just wondered if, to start off, you could just share a little bit about that as your kind of human intro, because we've done the formal bit. But and I particularly love your story about kind of when you were suffering or feeling the suffering with kind of depression, and you called the helpline, and I just wondered if you could go into a little bit about the realizations you had that helped you to find freedom.
Yeah, and I'm more than happy to, and always kind of like to qualify it by, when I talk about it, it sounds like a story, and it is, but it really wasn't.
Yeah.
Like, it was my life.
Yeah.
And so if you are in any way going through something like this, and I sound like I'm being flippant funny, it wasn't funny until it was. So
Yeah.
I don't want the way I talk about it to make it seem like what you're going through, if you're going through something, is in any way, doesn't matter. But I also do want you to kind of get, hope might be a lot closer at hand than you think. And so the middle length version of the story, there's all sorts of different
Yeah.
but I began dealing with depression at the age of 13, and it was just like feeling like death. Like I couldn't move. It was so much effort to get off the couch, to get out of bed, to go to school, to do any of the things that my friends seemed to be able to do without any effort. Now, I was not particularly unhappy, except about the fact that I found it so hard to do anything. So I didn't fit, in that sense, how you would think of, or how I would have thought of depression at the time. I wasn't like a miserable kid. I just had no energy at all. And it, at some point, and I don't have a moment where it started, I began thinking about killing myself. And at first it was kind of casual, and I made the mistake of mentioning it to somebody, and then it became very not casual, because people don't like it if you say that you're thinking about killing yourself. They really don't like it. It really scares them. And if enough people are looking at you and you think you're okay, and they're looking at you like you're dangerous and need to be locked up, you start to question whether or not you're okay. So as far as I would have said, yeah, I'm okay. I'm just really, really, really tired. I think about killing myself sometimes, but I'm fine. And I meant it. But I very quickly realized, well, I must be wrong, because everyone else is freaking about this. So then I started freaking about it. And so my levels of anxiety would get incredibly high, and the depression was almost a relief. So it was like my whole system would amp up to the point where it would shut down, and I could rest. Now, I kind of hated both extremes of it. I hated being that amped, and I hated being that depressed, but that was the cycle. Massively up, massive crash, massive up, massive crash. And this went on for years. And then I had a couple of incidents happen in short order that changed it. And interestingly, I guess, you know, birds of a feather. My best friends, one of my best friends at university, went insane, schizophrenic. He had a schizophrenic, full-on schizophrenic break from reality, and had to be locked up. And I did not cope. I started crying and didn't stop, didn't go to class because I was busy crying, didn't go, and this was through a whole day. And sometime in the middle of the night, I thought, you know, this could be a problem. ever sharp.
Mm.
But on the other hand, something in me did see enough to get me out of bed in the middle of the night. And I kind of wandered over to the infirmary on campus and pressed the bell because it was shut, but there was a night nurse came out. And I was just standing there sobbing. And it was really interesting because she was, kind of an old Southern woman. And she just put her arms around me. I don't know what protocol is, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't this. She just put her arms around me and we just started rocking back and forth. And she said, just say the Lord's Prayer with me, baby. Just say the Lord's Prayer with me. Our Father. And like, I didn't have the heart to tell her that I only knew the words because I'd been in Jesus Christ Superstar. And I was like, okay, our Father. And it was something actually really loving and reassuring about it. It was actually exactly what I needed. It was just somebody to care. I couldn't have explained what was going on at that time. And so, I got calmed down enough and she brought me in and she said, look, I'll bring in the doctor to see you. And I talked to the doctor and he said, he asked about what was going on and I kind of gave him the whole story. And again, he had that very serious, like, oh, this is a big deal. This is a very big deal. And, how long has this been going on? Well, on and off for the last 6 years, but, only like full on for the last sort of couple years, and I was genuinely thinking, well, no, it's not been that bad. He was just like, oh my God, and I could see his professional face fighting for control. And he said, well, we'll get you something to help you sleep and then we'll get you checked in the morning. And the door to the room closed and I had a moment of extreme clarity, just absolute calm and presence. And I just thought, I got two choices. Either I go into the system and whatever that entails, and I kind of knew I didn't want to do that without even knowing what it would entail, or I find a way to see something deeper. I find my own way out. And I literally found my own way out through the window of the room and onto a portico and jumped down a floor and ran back because they never took my name. So went back to my dorm room. And then a couple of nights later, I was in my dorm room and I had my own little schizophrenic break from reality. And as best I can describe it, a giant vacuum cleaner appeared outside my dorm window. I actually wasn't on drugs. I know it always sounds like I was, and started sucking my heart out of my chest. That's what it seemed like was happening. And to the point where I was holding onto the wall because it was really felt like it was happening. And I was holding onto the wall for dear life. And there was a phone and I reached down and I dialed the suicide hotline and I got a busy signal. And I thought that was the funniest thing that had ever happened to me. Like, it really, in the same way as that woman coming out and hugging me and rocking me and having me say the Lord's Prayer was better than any medical intervention they could have come up with, that busy signal was better than anything anyone could have said to me or listened from me, because it just broke me out of it. It popped me out of the suicide trance or whatever that was. And I remember thinking, the only thing that would make this worse and funnier would be lightning striking inside the room and a rainstorm following me around like in the cartoons, right? But it popped it. And I phoned a friend and she came and got me. And I woke up in the morning and for the first time in my life, I realized, oh, I don't want to kill myself. Now, I'd been thinking about it for half a dozen years regularly. And I just assumed because I was thinking about it, it must have some reality to it. But I realized that in that moment where all it would have taken to die would be to let go of the wall, I clung to that wall with everything I had. And it was the first time I saw thought. It was the first time I saw, oh, thought is this thing that runs through my head and doesn't necessarily have anything to do with anything. And it stopped being scary and started getting just interesting what ran through my head. because it no longer was me. It no longer was, well, I'm thinking this and I'm thinking that, and this is what it just was like, wow. And I just started calling it the suicide thought. It's like, oh, suicide thought's back. And because I wasn't scared of it, I started noticing, oh, it comes whenever I'm feeling stressed. And I thought, oh, okay, it's like an escape fantasy. I'm feeling stressed. I don't like the feeling of stress. So I have this thought about what might end the stress. No biggie. Years later, I coming up on our 30th wedding anniversary, but probably we'd been together about 6 years before I told Nina this story. Like I was doing okay by the time I saw her, so I never told her because I'm brave like that. And one night, for whatever reason, I just thought, okay, I'm going to just get this out. And so I tell her the story, and I won't even look at her because I'm afraid of what I might see on her face. And, when I finally finished and kind of looked over, I saw nothing but love, and it was great. And then she said, oh, I've got one of those. And I said, you have a suicide thought? She said, no, I have a divorce thought. I was like, what do you mean? And she said, well, she said, there've been a lot of times, especially early on, where I've just thought, oh, this isn't going to work. We're too different. We come from two different worlds. We're too young. We're too this. We're too that. We need to get divorced. And she said, and I realized one day that I don't want to divorce you. I'm just mad at you. And then it stopped being a scary thought. And that was that same thing of suddenly seeing, just because you have a thought in your head doesn't mean it is yours. It doesn't mean it's meaningful. It's not a deep insight any more than, if you flick around the television, everything that people say is true. It's like, no, most of it's not.
Yeah.
And even the stuff that sort of is biased. And so that was my first wake up. That was my introduction to the world of thought and how it's an independent variable. It isn't us. We're not thought. Just think we are.
Yeah. And I guess we can become observers of that process, which is what kind of makes it quite fun in a way.
Well, we automatically become observers when we see that we're separate from it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like we can't help but, because it's like I'm an observer of this teacup because it's obvious to me this teacup is not me. I don't have to practice being an observer of the teacup. Because I know it's not me. It's not actually what my fingers look like at the ends. If you hung out here long enough, you might think it is because I drink a lot of tea. But thought becomes the same.
Yeah.
And feeling becomes the same. And we start to go, oh, the body becomes part of it. And as you were saying at the beginning, we start to really see, well, I can't be these things. I'm not the teacup. I'm that which holds teacups. I'm not thought. I am that which thinks. I'm not the body. I'm that which experiences things through the body.
Yeah.
And I don't know that you ever need to go the other way and go, I am. But I definitely think it's helpful to start seeing what you're not.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It definitely helped me. And I think the way that you explain it is just, it resonated with me so much. It just kind of, again, popped me out of all the things that I thought that I was suffering with. And obviously, I had an experience of suffering, and at times we still do have experience of suffering, but I think just understanding where it's coming from is what gives us the freedom.
And I think that's the biggest thing that I didn't see then that I see now, is I saw that thought was part of it. I didn't see that thought was all of it.
Yeah.
And that was huge for me. So I, over the years, came to see more and more that, wow, yeah, boy, if I think differently, I feel differently. So I got into positive thinking and then neuro-linguistic programming and trying to control and manage thought and all that, and with very mixed results, sometimes great, sometimes not. And then I started to see, oh shit, it's all thought.
Yeah.
Like there's kind of the love and peace and creativity and aliveness, and then there's thought. And thought is an expression of that. Thought's not bad. I mean, it is also a channel for that. But suffering is 100% made of thought.
Yeah.
What once I really started to see that, what it did for me was it meant not that I didn't suffer, but that because my suffering didn't look rooted in something that had permanence,
Yeah.
it didn't look rooted in something that I was going to have to deal with. If your suffering is coming from something that by its very nature is transient, like if the only thing that could make you suffer was the wind, right? It'd be a pain in the ass when you were in the wind, but you also kind of know you're not screwed forever,
Yeah.
right? Wind comes, wind goes. But if you think the suffering is caused by something and wind, it's caused by your marriage and wind, it's caused by your financial situation and wind, it's caused by the world political situation and wind, it's caused by your personal health situation and wind, then you're stuck, because until you fix your health, your finances, and the world, you're going to suffer.
Yeah. And I love what you said there about kind of like for me, I had a similar thing. I kind of got very sucked into the self-help world, and it was like I really tried hard to fix everything and change everything, and I did like affirmations and all sorts of things. And similarly to you, I was meditating in Bali and thought that I was okay because I was meditating, but I realized it was the thought that I was okay because I was meditating that actually had settled me, rather than the meditation itself. And so I love the fact that it's like there's none of this stuff is really what is causing it. It is all thought.
Well, it's funny because I mean, yes, like I have nothing to add to that other than to say, no, really. Like that's the only reason when somebody's in this conversation and it's not changing their life, it's because they're hearing the words and agreeing with the words, but they don't really think it works that way. And it's a million miles from agreement and belief to realization and insight.
Yeah.
Like the idea won't help you, but seeing the truth of it will.
Yeah.
And I think that's the game changer that so many people in this conversation are looking for but not finding, is they go, but I know, yeah, I know I'm feeling thought. Oh yeah, no, I know that's this. Oh yeah, I know. But until I sort out my work situation, I'm gonna suffer.
Yeah.
Well, that would indicate that maybe you don't really know. And that's okay. Like, why would you? Everybody else is telling you it's your work situation. Everybody else believes it's, yeah, well, maybe you're thinking can help, but hey, money's real. Well, maybe, you're thinking can help, but hey, the plight of this group of people is real. Well, yeah, maybe your thinking can help, but this is real.
Yeah.
And it's not that there's not solidity to things in form. It's that we can't suffer from them. We can only suffer from unrecognized thought.
Yeah.
From thought that looks like it's something other than thought.
Yeah, I love that. And for those people who aren't maybe familiar with kind of, I guess what we're kind of diving into here is kind of the three principles. I don't know whether it's worth kind of exploring that a little bit, kind of how that plays out.
Yeah, I mean, so the three principles is a way of talking about spiritual truth. That's how I think of them. They're three doorways to our deepest self. And so we can debate endlessly about the doorways, or we can walk through them. So I'll talk about the doors, but honestly, if the way I talk about the doors is different to the way somebody else talks about the doors, fuck the doors. Just walk through them.
I love
Honestly.
that. And that's why I think it's quite nice, because I explore this with different people, because I think people resonate with different explanations of it. And I personally don't particularly use the 3 principles terminology when I'm explaining it. So it's, yeah.
So let me talk about it, and let me also, if I forget, which 50-50 at this point, but let me also talk about why I do actually find some value in talking about it, even though you don't have to talk about it.
Yeah.
So Sid Banks, Scottish welder, has an enlightenment experience in Canada, like you do, and essentially sees 2 things. He sees that all insecurity is thought. He's walking on a beach on a Canadian island with a psychologist, and they're basically having a sort of a poor me argument, like, oh, you think you've got it bad, oh, you think you've got it bad, and the psychologist, whatever he was, says to Sid, you're not insecure, Sid, you just think you are. And Sid, in that moment, for whatever reason, saw, oh my God, that's true. I'm not insecure. I just got a lot of insecure thinking. I am not a teacup. I just have a lot of teacups. and so he started to see that thought isn't reality, but it is what reality is made up out of. And he wound up calling it a principle, the principle of thought, because it's a constant. It's the same for everybody. It's doing it whether you believe in it or not, whether you like it or not, whether you affirm it or not. It just is a fact of life, a spiritual fact. People think. And then a couple of days later, he said, I didn't sleep for 3 days and 3 nights because my whole world was falling apart and this whole other world was coming in. So all of his thoughts started looking like thoughts, and the walls of his world became tissue paper and gossamer, and he started to experience this much bigger world that was beyond the form, before the form. And then on the 3rd day, he was with his wife and mother-in-law, and they were having a go at him about something. And he looked out the window, which was a picture window overlooking the ocean. And he described it as being sucked down a tunnel of light, very similar to experiences, near-death experiences, other enlightenment experience. And he experienced, in his words, God, his true nature. Mm. And he said the whole thing lasted 3.5 seconds, but could have been a lifetime. And he came back, and his wife and mother-in-law were just staring at him, and well, what's up with you? And but they could tell something had happened to him. And so the other principles, the other things that he saw are a part of who we are. One was consciousness, that we are this capacity to experience this spaciousness inside which life unfolds. That was one of the things he saw during his enlightenment experience. And that when you put the energy of thought into the space of consciousness, it feels solid, and we experience it as if it's really happening, which is why you can think yourself happy, think yourself sad, think yourself loving, think yourself pissed off, think yourself discouraged, think yourself scared. Because you put thought inside consciousness and it feels real. Mm. But what he also saw was that, he talked about it as the true meaning of God, is that there is an intelligence, an aliveness, a universal mind. And that's what he called the 3rd principle, universal mind, divine mind, that we are all made of, that runs through everything. It manifests in us as wisdom, as inner knowing. And that is our true nature. So thought is our true nature. Consciousness is our true nature. Mind is our true nature. And together, they create our experience of life. And to the extent that we see it, our experience goes higher. Our experience of everything goes higher and higher and higher. And we have a richer and richer experience of whatever is happening in our lives. Now, the reason that intelligence of mind is talked about in every religion, sometimes it's talked about as God, sometimes it's talked about as the Tao, sometimes it's talked about as Buddha nature. Pure consciousness, again, appears in every religion in some form. In a lot of Judeo-Christian religions, it's the light of God, the light of spirit, the light of the soul. Thought is less talked about in religion. It's usually the bad guy, right? Thought is suffering in Buddhism. But what Sid saw about thought was, no, it's just effort. It's just the building blocks. It is suffering, but it's also joy. It's just the creative force. It's the missing link between this spiritual reality and the reality that we are living in, with teacups and bodies and schools and suicide hotlines.
Yeah.
And the reason I like it as a description, even though there are many other descriptions of the same truths, is that there is no inherent dogma in it.
Mm.
There is nothing about the fact that we are made of a deep intelligence, that we are a pure infinite capacity for experience, that the creative force of the universe flows through us, that tells me who I'm supposed to vote for in the next election. Tells me who I'm supposed to worship on Sundays or Saturdays or Fridays.
Yeah.
That tells me what I can and can't eat. That tells me what I must or mustn't do. We add all of that in after the fact. And so consequently, I found that I can be in this conversation with Muslims and with Jews and with Christians and with Hindus and with atheists. And everybody kind of gets it because it's just true.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're all pointing to the same thing, really.
Well, it really does look that way to me. It was funny. I read a lot of the world's Bibles. I don't know if that's the right phrase for it, but I read sort of the Bhagavad Gita and the Dharmapada and the Tao and the Christian Bible and the Jewish Bible and the Quran and I really thought, these are all saying the same things until I got to the Quran. Don't worry, this doesn't stay controversial. And I was like, wait a minute, this one, where's the love in this one? This is all about violence and rah and rah. And then I talked to a priest about it. And he said, no, he said, all spiritual teaching by nature is metaphoric. You have to understand the context to understand the metaphor.
Mm.
The people that Muhammad was speaking to were warring nomadic tribes. So the language of the Quran is the language of war, of violence. But as it was explained to me, as it made sense to me, jihad, holy war, is against the infidel within. It's against the non-believer in you. It's nothing to do with the outside world. It's about cleansing and purifying your own soul, your own thoughts of doubt, your own thoughts of, well, no, it's not God, it's this. It's not God, it's that. Till you are living in a pure expression of that. And suddenly, it's the exact same book. Different metaphor for a different people.
Yeah.
But the exact same story.
And so these are basically the principles that explain all of that in a way.
Yeah, that's how I've seen them to be. And that's why I like using them as a basis for a lot of my teaching, because I've yet to find anyone who has an inherent objection to them.
Yeah, I agree. I love that. And I guess because you talk a lot about creativity and you talked about thought being seen as the bad guy, but obviously thought gives us the capacity to create. So can you talk a little bit about that? Because I know that's something that you help a lot of people with, is kind of the idea of kind of.
So there's a phrase that Sid used that I love. And he talks a lot about how all suffering is the innocent misuse of the gift of thought.
Mm.
Thought's just a pure creative potential, which means that you can use it to create suffering just as easily as you can use it to create lawn furniture. And it's just that we tend to default to the suffering one. Right? It's like, because we don't think that's thought. We don't see that that's thought. We can see, I'll often ask people, where did your last great idea come from? And sometimes they'll tell me where they were when they had it, but I point out, well, that's not where it came from. It didn't come from the shower. It didn't come from the beach. Right? And eventually they'll see, well, it came from nothing. It came via thought from nowhere. Came out of the blue, out of a clear blue sky. Well, that's how thought works. It's the missing link between the formless, pure potential and the form. It's the thing that brings divinity into our humanity, that brings the infinite into the finite. And as such, it's pretty cool. Like, I love that space. I love playing in the space where humanity and divinity collide, where the infinite becomes the finite. I think that's a really neat thing to do with a life.
Yeah. And for those at home who are kind of like, yeah, but how? How would you help them?
Well, generically, I'd say, you already know because you've been doing it your whole life. Just slow down a little and take a look, and you'll be able to begin to see how. Because it's not like you've never created anything. You're creating every second of every day.
Yeah, we can't not be creating, really.
Yeah. And then if that was too pat an answer, I'd say I've written a few dozen books about it. Find 1099, you'll be fine. But it's so I've taken to, in my work, a lot of people talk about teaching the principles or sharing the principles. I don't anymore. I talk about pointing, because I can teach concept while trying to teach truth. I can share concept while trying to share truth. I can't really point to something that isn't there. So I'm more interested in, well, how do I point somebody to what is already true and already happening? And so if somebody has a question, then that's what I will attempt to do in my answer, is point you towards what's already happening, rather than
because it's
share
infinite.
my version at length.
Yeah. And I guess it's just seeing that it's already there beyond all thought. That it isn't, in a way, as well.
But that is why, for me, this is such an interesting conversation to have for a living.
Yeah.
Because literally my job is to share nothing with people and convince them that nothing is really something.
And that they've already got it. So, yeah.
And what a cool job. Like, I say to my students, look, our job is to point to ice with fire, or to point to fire with ice. The closer we get to it, the less we have to point with. But on the other hand, that's the job. That's the gig. You don't like that job, take a different job.
Yeah. No, that's really cool. And you talk about in your bio that you're challenging the cultural myth that stress and struggle are a prerequisite to creativity and success. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it sounds very grandiose when I hear it played back, but in my head it sounded amazing. But my point, and I did have one, is that it's so endemic in people that I talk with that I don't know if I want to do that. I don't know if I want to put myself through what it'll take to write a book, to create another song, to build a company, to succeed. I don't know. I don't know if I'm up for it. Or the other people go, I'm up for it. Let's do this. And they've got me so hyped up in order to be up for it. And
like we have this idea that creativity is hard work sort of thing.
Oh, that it's hard and it's fragile and it's you know, for delicate little flowers, and you know, maybe you can do it for a while, but then you need to be in a very quiet room with a big gin and tonic for the next 3 days. And like, you know, it's not true. It is normal, but it's that way because we don't really understand it. And because we don't understand it, we make stuff up about it. You know, years ago when I was an actor, we used to sing warm-up songs before shows, and I used to do the sitcom in Wales, and one of the warm-up songs was, "We fear what we don't understand, we fear what we don't understand, we're off to burn the castle because we fear what we don't understand." It's kind of that. Like, we don't understand it, so we're scared of it.
Yeah.
And the solution to that is understanding. Not intellectual, oh yes, I see that this creates, but like in your bones knowing. Getting it like you get a joke, right? You understand how to ride a bike when you can ride a bike, not when you can tell somebody how to ride a bike. And we start to understand creativity, and it's not scary at all. It's exciting. It's fun. It's something to be played with and mastered. But if you don't understand it, it feels pretty tenuous, right? Who do I have to worship to not lose it? Which drug do I have to take to make sure I have access to it at the right time? And that's why so many creatives struggle. But take it out of the realm of official creativity into the realm of creation, into the realm of business, into the realm of success. Same thing. Well, yeah, it's got to work really hard, and you got to be stressed, and there's got to be pressure, and are you up for it? And so let me work out this much so that I'll be up for the stress, and let me practice meditation so I can handle the stress. And it's all from the assumption it's high pressure, high stress. But what if it isn't? Because last time I checked, creativity and creation are nothing to do with stress and pressure at all. Like literally nothing less gets here's how I drink a cup of tea with stress and pressure. Here's how I drink a cup of tea with no stress and pressure. What did the stress and pressure have to do with drinking the cup of tea? But we're so used to them appearing at the same time that we think there's some kind of cause-effect correlative relationship. And there just isn't. But as long as we think there is, we'll keep looking for it.
Yeah. Comes back to thought again.
It always does. Right? I mean, that's the Bluffer's Guide, and I don't encourage you to use the Bluffer's Guide because it will do you no good at all except at a cocktail party. But like, yeah, it's all thought. But that's so different from actually seeing, oh my God, this is thought. Like, I remember the day I realized shyness was thought. I really thought I was shy. I was convinced I was shy. I had years of evidence of my shyness. And we got invited, my wife and I, to a Grammys party. And, you know, it was like somebody invited me to my own funeral. And I was like, oh God, I don't want to go to my funeral. And I was sort of gearing myself up because I knew my wife would want to go and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, and I had the thought, I heard the thought in my head, don't they know how shy I am? And I went, huh.
Interesting. Yeah.
What if I'm not? And literally, suddenly I wasn't. Yeah. And my wife had to, for the first time in history, drag me away from the party. Now, I still have shy thoughts from time to time. Not a problem. But they don't seem like me anymore. They just seem like shy thoughts. I still have suicidal thoughts from time to time. Not very often because I don't get that stressed very often. But they don't feel like me. They don't feel like they're giving me important data. Yeah. So I was like, oh, wow, yeah. I must be really stressed.
I think that's really important to realize. I think because for me, I know some of my clients, they tend to assume that just because we know the three principles and get the understanding, that we don't then have these thoughts.
Which, okay, so here's my analogy for that. If you understand that fire can burn you, do you think that understanding will stop fire from burning you if your hand's in it? Of course it won't. It just explains what's causing the burn.
Yeah.
And you learn pretty quickly, if you get that's what's causing the burn, not to keep your hand in it. So we have this amazing feedback system built into the body called feeling. And our feeling is a 100% foolproof feedback mechanism on thought. And whatever you're feeling is what the thinking that you're having right now feels like. That's all it is. That's how it works. So if you are sitting in a way that's kind of uncomfortable, you wouldn't think anything weird about shifting in your seat to get more comfortable, because if you stay sitting the way that's uncomfortable, you're going to wind up with a sore shoulders and maybe your leg will fall asleep or whatever. But if you're sitting in a feeling of discouragement and it feels kind of most people would try to work on the discouragement or try to understand where the discouragement comes from, or think about how miserable their future is going to be given that they're never going to amount to. They do anything but what we would do if we were feeling uncomfortable in our physical body and we'd shift our body. If we're uncomfortable in our thinking, which we know because we're uncomfortable in our feeling, we just shift our thinking. We don't have to think anything different. We just kind of go, probably not worth not continuing to think whatever the hell I'm thinking. And thought is so fluid that the second we let it go, it changes.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's almost like, because one of the things I heard when I came across the principles was there's nothing to do. And in a way, even just thinking that we have to change our thought, that can almost add a whole layer of more thinking in to kind of distract us. But actually, if we just leave it alone, it's just going to be replaced with a new thought.
Well, right. And it's why I like the metaphor of clouds for thought. Because we kind of get that if we don't like the way a thought looks, we don't have to do anything about it. A, we can't, and B, it's going to look different in an hour.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't, most of us would not spend our days trying to master cloud shaping because we understand that that's just not how clouds work. If a pilot doesn't understand clouds, might go, man, it's hard to get up in the sky. There's so many of these clouds in the way, and fly all around trying to find an opening. But if you understand clouds, you can fly right through them.
Yeah.
They're not solid. They look solid. Right? I know the first time I went on an airplane, I so wanted to go lie down on a cloud. Fortunately, I wasn't allowed to. Now that I understand clouds, still looks cool, not tempted to try it.
Yeah. And in that way, I think I can see there when you talk about creativity, it's like the creativity is still happening despite the clouds kind of being there. You can just keep going and know that they don't really mean anything.
Yeah, it's I would say I almost in equal measure meet people who give their state of mind, their thoughts and feelings way too much attention, and people who don't give them anywhere near enough attention. And that's why it's difficult when you have a sort of well, you should do this, or you should do this, or you shouldn't do that. Well, it depends. If you worship at the altar of your feelings, oh my God, I'm feeling this. Oh, I need to process this. Oh, I'm going to need to sit in bed for 2.5 days. Oh, I need to talk this out. Oh, I need to. Well, boy, you're going to be very busy and not much is going to happen in your world. But similarly, if you're like, fuck what I feel, I'm just going to make things happen. I'll see you in hospital, dude.
Yeah.
I actually had a client come, and he was a very successful businessman. And this was, I was working in London, and he was, oh my God, he was just like, I was a little scared being in the room with him. And I said to him, I said, "Are you always wound this tight?" And I'm not wound tight. And I must have looked scared rabbit or something, because he stopped and he went, "Well, I did get into a fight with somebody on the tube on the way in, so maybe I'm a little wound tight." And then as we talked a bit more, he said, I wanted to ask you about one other thing. He said, I often wake up in the middle of the night on the floor. I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, I have these nightmares, and I wake up when I've thrown myself out of bed and landed on the floor. Is that normal? And the story has a mostly happy ending. He went away because he wasn't sure that there was anything in it for him to be in this conversation with me. And then 2 weeks later had a heart attack and was in hospital. But the happier bit of the ending is he got it.
Right.
Like he really did see. And he's doing well. Last time I heard from him, he's doing very well.
Amazing.
But you know, so neither of those extremes is particularly helpful.
Yeah, it's about getting the balance right. I remember when I first came across the principles and I literally heard there was nothing to do. I was like, great, I'm going to just lie here. And then I realized, no, there's nothing to do to be psychologically okay. I still can do
Yes,
stuff.
but if you'd like to have a successful business or a nice marriage, you might want to show up.
So that was an interesting learning. It's like, yeah, okay, so this creativity then, there's still stuff to do, you know, it's not just going to land in my lap. And
I think that is a common misinterpretation. That line in particular gets misinterpreted more than almost any other of Sid's lines. That do nothing. First off, what he actually said, according to the people I know who you spend time with him, is the context for it was, what do you do to deepen your understanding of this? What do you do to get happier? What do you do to wake up to your true nature? And he said, look in a direction and do nothing. Now, first off, do you hear the doing in there? Look in a direction. Look towards quiet. Look towards silence. Look towards the space before thought. Look towards what is true universally, not personally. And then you don't have to do anything. Because if you look in a direction, you'll start to see what's there in that direction. You don't have to do anything else. But it gets pulled out of context so many times, and people say, well, I'm not supposed to do anything. I mustn't do anything. I mean, I actually had a guy come on a course that said he ran a pharmaceutical company in Switzerland. And it was, and he came on a course that I was like a coaching program. And he said that George Pransky and I had ruined his business. And given that I'd never met him, and as far as I knew, George had never met him, I was like, oh, how did we do that? And he said, well, I heard you guys in a talk say, do nothing. And so I've done nothing. And 6 months later, the company's going bankrupt. You know, so, you know, there's two solutions. One is don't talk ever. And the other is do your best to be clear. And that's what I do as best I can.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for me, I kind of, it made sense because I was coming from that kind of constant seeking with self-help. It kind of made sense in a way that I didn't actually need to do all that to be psychologically okay. But I still needed to do stuff if I wanted to create. So it was quite a nice insight that it's like, oh yeah. And for me now, it's kind of like getting that balance of allowing stuff to unfold, but still doing whatever kind of comes to mind and that I enjoy.
Well, see, I sometimes think of it as the difference between divine physics and physics. Right? So physics, the science of the physical world, the world of form, right? Things work a certain way. And, you know, putting aside the quantum for the moment, you know, some of Newton's laws still work pretty well, right? An object at rest tends to stay at rest. An object in motion tends to stay in motion. Easiest way to create stuff, generally speaking, is to do stuff. Right? That works great in the world of form. But divine physics doesn't work the same way. the inner world, the formless world, doesn't follow Newtonian law. And so that's why trying to apply spiritual truth to the physical world is a mixed bag.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. So I'm just thinking of some of the common things that people feel kind of stuck with creativity, and wondering if we could talk around those just quickly. So like if somebody was feeling creatively blocked, I know we've kind of touched on how that works, but I don't know whether you can speak specifically to that.
Well,
and does anybody have any questions, by the
I was
way?
going to say, it almost would be easier to talk in the specific than the abstract. If there isn't anyone, then I can do an abstract take on it. But
does anybody have a question that they want to either join us and kind of speak face to face, or just let us know what it is in the
or hide with your question in chat like a coward.
Exactly.
You know, either way.
So Matt, are you saying that you want to join? Let me just see if I can unmute you. You wanting to chat face to face? Where are you? Yes, Matt.
I see Matt.
Right.
Hi.
Yeah.
So Matt, one thing is you're going to have to explain the cookie to me.
The cookie. I was just being silly, just entertaining myself.
Sure.
They're nice. I'm shame I can't send you one. To be honest, I don't really have a question. I more wanted to say thank you, really, because you're a kind of spiritual gateway drug, I would say, and probably have been for a lot of people. And I guess the gateway drug and the hard stuff at the same time. So it's and it's just, I feel very grateful how what's been shared and what I've seen and how it's impacted my life and my wife and everything in between. It's awesome.
Thank you very much.
Keep on doing what you're doing.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you. And I think Josie has a question.
Hi, Josie.
Hi, Michael. Thank you for that. That was really insightful. I did have a question regarding suffering. So my question is around, you mentioned form, and I was thinking about, in terms of, if hot water was thrown on you, you inevitably feel the burn, and that would, some people would say that's pain and that's been received. And I'm curious to know if you've got like a mum who's got a child who is malnourished and she can't afford to kind of feed the child, the experience feels really real. And so I don't quite understand how that suffering would be kind of a misuse of thought, because she's experiencing feedback through her body. That's the thought that comes up, is I can't feed my child and therefore I'm suffering.
So let me distinguish between the experience of the mother and the experience of the child.
Yeah.
So the child in the first instance, or whoever got the boiling water in their face, that was pain, right? That was physical pain. They got a physical burn. They experienced physical pain. In order to suffer from that, they have to make up a story about how it shouldn't have happened, how it was their fault that it happened, how it was the world's fault that it happened, how whatever story that makes it not okay that it happened, or that makes it their fault that it happened, or something like that. The mother with the malnourished child, the child will go through the physical discomfort brought on by that, though the body's pretty kind and actually tends to soothe over that, so it's not constant. So without the thought, the body does okay for a while till it switches off. The mother's suffering is 100% thought. She thinks she should be able to provide. She thinks she has failed to not put her child in a situation. She shouldn't have brought the child into the world if she couldn't take care of them. What kind of a mother is she in order to? None of that feeds her child. That's why it is a misuse of the gift of thought. That same amount of thought applied to how can I find food for my child
Mm-hmm.
would inevitably bring up ideas about how to find food for her child.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So
Yeah.
it's not about don't feed your kid. It's like that's what thought's great for.
Mm-hmm.
Coming up with real solutions to real problems. But we tend to use it to torture ourselves as much or more as we do to create in the world.
Okay.
That's the innocent misuse of the gift of thought,
Right.
as I'm talking
Yeah.
about.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay.
That's great.
Cool. Thank you.
I love that question. Yeah, that's I think that's given a really great example as well of how you can kind of find freedom from suffering and then kind of unravel a life you love by kind of using thought to be more creative with the solution in a way. So
So you know that little catchphrase you read about, challenging the cultural mythology about, well, part of the cultural mythology is that the only thing that gets people to serve humanity is suffering.
mm,
Not so. In fact, suffering sometimes can act as a catalyst, but often is why I'd love to serve humanity, but I'm in so much pain and suffering right now, I can't. Whereas if I'm not, then I actually have a pretty good shot of making a difference with humanity.
mm. Yeah, I love that. Yeah. We have another question. Jennifer, can you unmute yourself, Jennifer? And
Hey, Jennifer.
Hello. Hi. Yeah, thank you, Michael. This has been so interesting. Actually, I think my question kind of follows on from actually what we were just talking about with Josie.
Yeah.
In that I talk myself quite a lot around creativity and how we all have that kind of unique capacity for being inspired and coming up with lots of different ideas. And I think so to build on where Josie was, my kind of question is, what do you do when you've got all those ideas and there are so many of them and they all feel equally exciting and inspiring? Kind of how do you pick one, or what do you do with the others that while you're waiting to kind of get to them? And that's kind of where I can feel like I struggle of being so inspired and having so many ideas. It's like, which one do I do first, or which ones do I forget about? Or
Well, if they're really all equal, why would there be any better strategy than eeny, meeny, miny, mo? Like honestly, it's like, hey, I don't know. There's no way to know what's going to work out ahead of time. So if I really am sitting in a place where it's like, wow, there's 13 things I could do, and I would be thrilled if I spun a wheel with all 13 on them. I would thrilled whatever came up at the top of the wheel, I'd be excited. Put them all on a wheel and spin it. Put them all in a hat and pull one. Now, what's more likely in my experience is that when you put them all in a hat, there'll be one or two you hope you draw out of the hat.
yeah.
And that's what lets you know.
Mm.
But that's all.
Yeah.
Look, you're never going to get to everything. Not how it works. I guess just we have a finite amount of time. So
Very true.
I've been using this analogy this week for some reason, but I'm a big reader, and I used to be a bigger reader. Like I used to read a couple books a day. Sometimes I'm down to like 3 a week. And I realized at one point fairly early on that I was never going to get to every book because they were writing them faster than I could read them.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, given that there are always going to be more books than I'm going to read, there is never a reason for me to pick up a single book I don't really want to read. Because I'm never going to run out.
Yeah, that's true.
So I feel the same about ideas. Like I'm never going to get to all of them. So I may as well start with the ones I'm really into. And by the time I'm through those, there'll probably be other ones I'm really into.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I guess we're kind of conditioned into thinking that there's the one right idea as well.
Yeah. Well, which is to my mind just a slightly comical notion.
Yeah.
Because how the hell would we know?
We have another question from Joe. If there's time, is that okay?
Yeah, we can sneak in another one.
Joe, can you unmute yourself?
Hi.
Hello. Hi.
Hi, thanks for taking the question, and thanks for doing this. I missed the first half, so I'll watch the replay when it comes up, but so you might have already spoken to it. But you were talking earlier about like not so much looking in the direction of, oh, this is thought and that's thought and that's thought and that's thought, but more looking in the direction of what's creating the thought. And I'm kind of struggling with that because I don't know, like I know like I'm looking at nothing, but at the moment all I'm seeing is nothing, and I keep getting distracted by the, oh, that's thought and that's thought and that's thought, if that's making any sense.
Well, it's making some, but not quite enough for me to helpfully
Okay.
So what is it that you would like to be able to experience more of, that this feels important to work through, to get to?
Just more peace of mind, basically.
Okay, cool. So peace of mind is a pretty good description of what it feels like when we rest in the space before thought. So thoughts are going to come into peace of mind and go out of peace of mind.
Yeah.
And if we don't hitch a ride on them, we just stay in peace of mind. But if we do hitch a ride on them, it's okay, because we'll wind up back in peace of mind.
Yeah, I guess I just find my ride is very bumpy at the moment, and I would prefer it as a bit more smooth, but I guess that's just part of the journey.
Well, it probably is. And the fact that it feels like you're on a ride suggests that maybe you're riding the thoughts.
Yeah.
Because the peace of mind doesn't go anywhere, because it already is everywhere.
Yeah, I keep getting hijacked by them all the time, and I don't want to be, but it's just life, I guess.
Yeah, no, and I look, I don't think there's anybody who doesn't get hijacked by thought from time to time. And here's what I found helpful. For me, when it started looking obvious to me that I did really well in peace of mind, and I kind of sucked at life when I wasn't in it, I really got genuinely interested in spending more time in peace of mind. Like, not because it's a good idea, but because I kind of saw it. You know what? That's where my bread is buttered. And then I began to see that the only thing that ever takes me away from peace of mind is my own thinking. And then all I had to do was start noticing my thinking taking me away. You know, it was like, what's your name? You're not coming up on my screen.
Oh, Joe.
Joe. It's like, oh, they've kidnapped Joe again, right? You know, but I'm watching them kidnap her. So it's like, caught you. And you don't have to do anything, because as soon as they're caught, they're like, oh, sorry, Joe. You know,
okay.
Swiper, no swiping from Dora the Explorer. Like that's kind of all there is to it. You start to notice yourself thinking yourself out of it.
Yeah.
And in the noticing, it just happens less, and you find your way home quicker.
Yeah.
And it's not vigilance. It's just noticing.
Yeah. Okay.
So something to play with.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Nice. Thanks.
Thanks for that, Joe. There was one more person who was trying to ask something. I don't know if they're still here, because they're saying their connection.
Okay, and then I am going to have to hop in within 5 minutes.
Oh yes, they've just asked via chat. It says how to point a friend or colleague in this direction who's very attached to her identity as someone who is depressed, so she can see what I have gained.
Well, you know, there isn't an answer to that question. I think if it's surprisingly powerful to share your experience with people. Like, a lot of times, if they can really see in you, it's not just, hey, here's a great idea I have that make me better than you now. But they start to experience you as man, you used to be as depressed as I was. What happened? There's generally a basis for a conversation there. But in the meantime, I'm a big fan of pointing people to the stuff that you enjoy. Like if you like my books. If you like Sid Banks's stuff. If you like George or Amy or any of the other people who've been in this series stuff, you can point them towards that. You can be the teacher, but in the end, do you really care who they see it from, whose finger they follow to look? Like it doesn't matter. If I want one of my kids to have a nicer experience of life, I don't care if it's Charles Manson's finger they follow, if it's pointing to truth. I don't need it to be mine. I don't need it to be somebody who I likes. I just need it to actually get them to look.
Yeah, that's lovely. And I think even just showing up and being love and loving them, I think can help as well, because that's kind of the pointing back to wisdom as well. But she also says, or whoever it is that said, they have bought her your book, of course, as well. So
yeah. And you know what, if I can, I'll finish with one thought that a friend of mine shared with me that I find really has been helping me. And there's a lot of debate in the 3P community about what the best way to share this is, and she said, if you really want to show people who they are, be who you are.
I love that. Yeah.
And it's just kind of as simple as I know how to make it.
Yeah, and that's a really nice point to end on as well. I think that's has a nice feeling to it. So so thank you, Michael, for that. If people want to hear more from you, which I'm sure obviously they do, I'm sure they know where to find you, but just in case, would you want to share?
michaelneill.org. You just pop around there and you'll find me Instagrams and Facebooks and podcasts and
Your morning rambles on
morning
Instagram.
rambles and the work.
That's cool, and I'll put that in the show notes as well.
Right.
So yeah, thank you very much for sharing.
Pleasure. Nice to meet you.
And yeah, nice to meet you too. And yeah, so I'm just gonna do a little bit about next time and introduce the speaker for next time. So feel free to leave if you have to leave. But everybody's saying thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
So lots of thank yous. Thank you. Yeah, so just to finish, next week, sticking with the theme of creativity, next Friday, the 28th of February at the same time, we are joined by special guest Samantha Lowry, best known as SC Lowry or Butterflies and Pebbles. She is one of my favourite poets. So you probably know, if you follow me, my own creative love of poetry, because I'm a writer as well. But this gorgeous lady is one of my favourites, and I can't wait to have a beautiful conversation with her. So she's here to share all about basically, about kind of creating, her passion and creating from the heart. So yeah, lots of fun to be had next time. If there are any questions, then you feel free to drop me a message via the Member Vault, where I'll be hosting the replay of this session as well. And thank you guys for joining as well. So there's lots of thank yous in the group chat. So yeah, but thank you for joining us. So yeah, and that's all really. So have a good evening or rest of the day. Bye guys.